publishing professional, I didn't have all those hats in my backpack, and now you have to learn it on the fly. When my first book came out, I found myself in the same position. Probably 99% of authors come out and realizes, wow, there's like a whole world I need to learn that I didn't even understand existed. So that research phase is very important, and it's only to be overlooked at your detriment.
But you're speaking really of the research of finding who publishes what.
Yes.
And who's accessible. Yeah. And there is a very fat book called The Writer's Market, right, that has magazine publishers and book publishers and tremendous amount of information. And yes, it's overwhelming, absolutely overwhelming. But again, getting a book published, even if you independently publish it, is a huge accomplishment.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's nothing to take away from that.
Right.
But I think one of the things I talk about in the book is, if you're going to go through to the point of doing books, you really should think about where you want to go with this before you start. I make a sort of a semantic line between writers and authors, where a writer is someone who's written a book and they want to see it published, and that's wonderful, but their goal is really for a single title, as opposed to authors who, they get through one book, they can't wait to get started with a second book. So that's more of a career path as opposed to a writer who's looking for a solitary book path. How you approach the market, what kind of publisher you're going to look for, your marketing considerations can be quite different between those two camps. For an author who's looking to do book after book, your selection of a publisher is a very important decision, because you're looking to build a relationship. You're looking for a future. For a writer, that's not to say that they're not looking for a future, but they may be looking for a publisher in terms of what's the most accessible, what gives me the most options with this single title. And then if you want to do something later, okay, you do something later. But at least in the meantime, your doors are open. So it's a little bit of a different approach between those two camps. But again, the research is the same. The research is vital.
Right. And I'm assuming that you covered small press,
yes,
traditional, and
yes,
self-publishing.
I give a background in book publishing, the historical difference between the three, how they've changed. Of course, there's this monster called the internet, and it changed the rules on everything, everything media related.
Yes.
So, the publishing world in particular was turned on its ear the same way the music industry was turned on its ear because of the digital dissemination of content. The publishing world, I think if you look at the history, they failed to learn some of the lessons the music industry learned. Of course, everything in the book industry moves slower, so compared to the rest of the world. So what the music industry learned in the space of a few years, the publishing industry still seems to be playing catch-up. In some regards, I think they've done a little better job of embracing digital content and reaching an audience through digital means, but there's still, a divide at some points between, well, is it print or is it digital? And you have some publishers who will only do ebooks, and you have other publishers who don't take ebooks seriously. But I think if you look at the way the market is going, because it's had a few years now to function with all these different avenues of publication, that you've seen some small press people and independent press people, some self-published people break through into significant mass market sales. Just as an example, Andy Weir with The Martian. He started out self-publishing, and now we have a movie, and he's done very well with it.
50 Shades of Grey.
Right, 50 Shades of Grey. Well, regardless, and this is one of the things I talk about, is regardless of what you may think of a particular piece, there's a lot to learn from the success stories to see how they became successful, what these people had that helped them out. Because there is a lot of people try to put in a nutshell generalized marketing advice, a generalized publication path. And I think while there's certainly things to learn from that and becoming aware of different ways, it's good as a story, so to speak, but I don't really think it's so much productive, because every person is going to come to the table with such a different background, resources that they have. I think if there's one secret to anything, whether it's publication, marketing, whatever aspect you look at, is to be able to sit down and look at yourself and say, what do I have in my life that's an intrinsic factor I can work with? What skills do I have? What access do I have? What people do I know? What are my comfort levels with social media? And as long as you can define those things for yourselves, your path forward will not only be much more productive, but it'll be much more comfortable and much easier.
That's
Because,
very good advice.
yes, and a lot of it has to do with confidence. Because, as you know, rejection is a major part of the
Oh, yeah.
publication process. And a lot of that rejection, it's blanket rejection. And sometimes it feels like you're banging your head against the wall.
Well, you have to realize that you're working with an industry that produces an enormous number of books, and they need to make money from them. So therefore, they look at your book merely as a vehicle to make money. And if they don't see that your topic, or you may have the best written book in the world, but if it isn't hot, it isn't a hot topic now, it's just not going to make it. So I'm going to ask you, because we have just a few minutes left.
Okay.
What's your best advice to somebody who's starting out writing?
Best advice to someone starting out, remember that perseverance is key. It's going to be a long, slow process, so settle down, don't be impatient. Second thing, invest with your mind and not your heart. It's very tempting, and I think every author has a story of money they wish they had not invested in something. But at the same time, be open to opportunities. But keep your opportunities in check with where you are in the market. You know, sometimes there's a mentality of go big or go home, but you have to keep in mind that with each book you publish, with each step you take, your options and what you can do with your options expand greatly. So when you're on your first book, your second book, unless something really dramatic starts happening with your sales, moderate what you do. Because and the wonderful thing with publishing books is, you know, you publish a book, maybe it doesn't perform the way you would like to, but it doesn't go away. So eventually your back catalog becomes a resource for you and not something to look at as, you know, not fulfilling a dream.
And I think that's really the thing that speaks most to the book that you've written, is the fact that you've done this.
Yes.
This is all out of your own experience, and we really should talk about the fact that you're a successful science fiction writer of all of these books, which they will eventually show on screen, and talk about all the awards that you've won.
Yes, my first three books combined have, between Remnant, Oddities and Entities, and Prism, they've received over a dozen national book awards. They've all received glowing critical praise. And, you know, I look at that all as a lesson. And it's, you know, while I'm very proud of that, but I look at it as that's a vindication of the idea of doing your research, focusing your craft, and just keeping your nose to the grindstone and persevering. My last two books, The Digital Now, The Writer's Primer, they just came out in December, so crossing my fingers to maybe get some more recognition with them. But the process I learned from book to book has basically stayed the same. I've refined it, you know, practical experience, but it's pretty much the same thing. You know, write the best thing you can write. Try to look for a segment of the market where your writing can fit. Focus on that, because that's going to be your avenue to getting noticed. You know, it's great to write a book that defies genres, but unless you're a well-known author already, the problem is you won't be able to classify your book, and your book will sort of be lost. But so find a focus where you want to write, find what you're best writing at, what you're most comfortable with, and stick with that. So for me, it's been science fiction. So that's why I've.
And you went from short story to novel.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Thank you, Roland.
Okay, thank you.
That was very, very helpful.
Thank you. Glad. Always glad to help out.
I'm sure you'll be back again.